Bryce. Good evening and welcome to the October 21st regular meeting of council, starting at 6:30 p.m. And at this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda. Are there any emergent items from any of the councillors tonight? Seeing none. Administration?
I believe.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Some items to deal with about budget meetings next week.
Okay, Deborah is, I think, going to speak to those items.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the first item that we are going to remove is item 3.1, item pertaining to FOIP section 16.1CI. And in its place, we would like to add item 3.1, item pertaining to FOIP section 24.1D. And then we'd also like to add an urgent item, 13.1, budget meeting dates. Proposed changes.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion to confirm the agenda as amended.
So move, Your Worship.
We have a motion from Councillor Peterson for that. All in favor? And that motion is carried. And we are now, I need a motion to go in camera.
So moved.
We have a motion from Councillor Corbeil to go in camera at 6:32. All in favor? And we're in camera. And welcome back to the regular meeting of council for October 21st. We are reconvening, it's at 7 p.m. And we've come out of the in-camera. We have no presentations or recognitions. And that brings us to item 5.1, remembering our roots. And I'd like to welcome Mr. John Godsman, who'll be speaking to us. He'll be talking about his latest book, Remembering Our Roots, Volume 4. Good evening and welcome. And just a reminder, you have a 10-minute presentation time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, fellow councillors, thank you very much for seeing me tonight. In the past, I've approached you for sponsoring volumes 1, 2, and 3, and you've graciously provided me with some funding. And tonight I'm here to see if you've any money left in your kitty to sponsor number 4, which hopefully will be out next month. And incidentally, this will be my last book. I'm retiring, finally. Volume 4, just for interest's sake, this is the covers, the cover, and I would like council to give me their input as to which cover they like best. So
Sure.
can I walk around just?
Yep, and I'll put my mask on as you come to me.
Oh, they're upside down. Your black glasses are fogging. That one's still upside down.
Are the pictures the same, just different colors?
Pictures are all old-time photographs from around this area, which incidentally, the Strathmore Historical Society does not have a photograph of the oldest town hall building in Strathmore.
Oh,
So I'm just wondering if anybody here is old enough to know what it looked like.
I'll definitely ask my,
I like
my
the
father,
right?
I prefer the darker
Thank you.
ones. Thank you.
Definitely the red.
That's the one I like.
The original town hall?
It's probably because it was in, part of it was in the community. If you read.
The pictures are on here,
Again, I read
all
through.
came from the
Okay.
Strathmore
I read
Historical
both.
Society.
And
And
in
because
the
it's remembering
one
our
that
roots,
Paul wants to be
that is why they're all old
It talks
pictures.
about the location.
I could easily get a picture of the new town hall, but that's not old.
Well, I'll
Some of the buildings in the
definitely
downtown.
ask family because my father as well as his father were both conceived in that.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. Do we have any questions from councillors for Mr. Godsman? Do we have any questions for him? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you very much for showing that. And I just wanted to say thank you very much as well for the other books that you produced. I've read through them and I found them quite interesting. The question I have is just how much would you need for your next one?
Well, you were very generous last time, and I certainly don't need that. I don't know what the cost is going to be. Assist Business Centre is doing this one completely. In the past, Assist has taken the articles from the Times and transcribed them into book form, and then the paperwork has gone to Godsman in Calgary. This time around, everything has been done by Assist Business Centre, and they haven't given me an estimate yet. I meant to say to you, this book will be different. There are approximately 26 articles on the seniors, 19 articles on Western Irrigation District, because last year I wrote 19 articles for the 75th anniversary of WID, 6 articles on the seniors clubs of Strathmore. It has been very difficult to get people to see me to write the articles this time around. I'm told there's 1,200 seniors in Wheatland County. Well, I've only seen 160, 180 of them. Where's the rest of them? So anyway, that's part of the reason I'm retiring after this. The other is, as you can tell, I'm still losing weight and health isn't on my side. So,
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Sobel?
Thank you, Your Worship. creates a bit of difficulty in going forward at this point when we don't know what we're looking at. So I'm wondering if it's possible to invite you to get a hold of our administration once you find out what the cost of this book is to, in order for us to make a proper decision on this, if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Perhaps you could phone Deborah Hamrick. She'd be there, you've been in contact with her quite a bit.
I talked to you this morning, so, yeah, I can
That's not the
email,
last name I was given.
I can email you my contact information.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, and we're just about to enter further budget negotiations and talks, so it's actually perfect timing for this.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, and best of luck for your health, too.
Thank you.
Councillor Cox, sorry.
Sorry, can I just ask you, can you tell us what did we give you last year? Our last book?
$1,000.
Okay. And do you,
Previous years, you gave me 500.
do you want people to reach out to you?
Not now, no.
No, you're done.
I'm done.
Okay, that's all I need.
In fact,
Thank,
after a number of requests from people that know me, I've had to rewrite my own article because it hasn't been done since 2015.
Perfect.
So
Thank
that's
you,
what
and-
I'm doing.
and we have one more from Councillor
John,
Peterson, and then
I just wanted to
Montgomery-
thank you for the work
Montgomery.
you did for WID. It's a credit to the community. And I think that it will have a place of honor in the new building. And
Thank you.
that was really, really good work, and you were the guy for the job, and it fit in well with this. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Peterson. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Worship, and I want to thank you as well. My grandparents were actually one of the seniors that did get wrote up
I
in one of the...
recognize the surname.
Yes, yes, in one of the books, and they've both passed now, and it's something that, you know, will continue on and people can read about, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I've enjoyed doing it. I've made so many friends doing this. I even got some venison from one of them.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. Thank you, John, and best of luck for your health in the future. We wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that brings us to item 6. We do not have a consent agenda. What is going on? Consent agenda, item 7, confirmation of minutes. 7.1, the adoption of the September 16th, 2020 regular council meeting minutes. Councillor Corbeil.
I move that council adopt the September 16th, 2020 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you very much. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that brings us to 7.2, the adoption of the October 7th, 2020 regular council meeting minutes, page 13. Councillor Bauer.
I move that council adopt the October 7th, 2020 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you for that motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. We have no tabled items under item 8. We move on to item 9, items, reports from administration. 9.1, Municipal Reserve disposition of Lot 6, Municipal Reserve, Block 17, Plan 9411613. And Mr. Simpson, welcome tonight.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council. Can I remove this? Or? I won't spend a lot of time. I think the report is quite explanatory, but just a very quick background on why we're here with this request to move forward, basically with it's removing the MR designation. The reason is we have a couple of permanent signs on this parcel of land, and you're not allowed to put permanent signs or virtually anything other than sort of recreation or whatever on a municipal reserve. So for us to make it legal, we need to remove the MR designation so that we can then lease to the people that owns the sign. I know there's a little shack there as well. I'm not quite sure who owns that, but we'll have to get to the bottom of that once we get the MR designation removed. And removing it is quite a simple process. You know, we need council to set up a public hearing. We hear anybody that are for or against or whatever. We gather that up. If council wishes to proceed, they make a motion to proceed. We gather up the feedback from that hearing, and we apply to the Registrar of Land Titles office, and basically it moves forward quite simple. We then would, the land then would be in a clear and title name with the town, and then we could move forward dealing with the businesses that have that, the signs in particular on there. The shed could remain or it could be removed off, because I think it's temporary, I'm not positive.
It is temporary, but it's in the parking lot, if that's still parking. I think a little piece of it from like the map shows.
On both? Do you think it's in the parking lot? or-
It is mostly in the parking lot, yeah.
Okay, well, we'd have to determine where it is and go from there. But that, just a quick background of why we're here and what we're asking for. And I'd be prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Mr. Simpson. Councillor Sobel and then Councillor Montgomery.
Just very quickly, thank you for that, Jim. Just very quickly, I take it the only other option we have would be to have everything that's on there removed.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. I will move the council schedule a public hearing for Municipal Reserve Disposition Lot 6MR, Block 17, Plan 9411613 on November 18, 2020.
Thank you for the motion. You've all heard that motion. Is there any discussion on that? See, Councillor Cox?
Council days?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
The 4th and 18th.
Okay, thank you. It's the middle one that we're missing.
Right, the 11th.
Thank you.
So we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? And that motion is carried. That brings us to item 9.2, Bayside Place Affordable Housing, page 26. Good evening.
Good evening, Your Worship. Good evening, Council. Would anyone mind if I? Okay, thanks. So, Bayside Place is a project that was envisioned back in 2012 as a place where people who wouldn't typically be able to afford a property in the town of Strathmore could do so with the benefit of a second mortgage on the property. There are approximately 48 units in Bayside Place, and the amount of the outstanding mortgages is about $2.4 million. So, ongoing administration by the town is required to administer the qualifying criteria. And what they do is when a person applies to join, they want to purchase a unit there, what they'll actually have to do is meet the income criteria for the property. And that's the one aspect of the job that the town currently handles. Now, what happens is if they qualify for the second mortgage, caveat is placed on the title, and the caveat stipulates that in order to rent their unit, after they've purchased it, they actually it's defined as a triggering event. So what that means is they have to repay that second mortgage. Now, due to the current pandemic conditions, this really hasn't been an issue in the past. There hasn't been a lot of renters in there. But what has happened over the last 6 or 7 months, 8 months, is that with the pandemic, people have lost jobs, they've had to move, so they're kind of scrambling, some of the residents there. And what they're doing is to avoid having to pay back that second mortgage, they're having roommates. And these roommates would assist them in paying the rent. And so that's what's happening. Now, the thing is that this project was originally envisioned as a place, as I mentioned, for people who could not be able to afford a property elsewhere, a chance to buy a property at a lower cost and build equity. As I just mentioned, due to the slowdown in the real estate market, property owners in Bayside Place have had difficulty in selling their properties. This, coupled with the economic disruption, has placed many in Bayside Place in a difficult position, unable to sell their property and having to take jobs or move elsewhere. Now, on the other hand, many of the condo boards and many of the condo owners do not want the condo units in the complex to be rented out in contravention of the caveat that's placed on the title. And they want the town to take enforcement action, which means foreclosure. We obtained a legal opinion, and that in order to enforce the caveat, we would have to commence foreclosure actions, keeping in mind any sort of statute of limitations that might be in place. So it's a difficult position. I think everyone can see there's two sides to this issue. So one of the things that was suggested is that perhaps with the assistance of different bodies, perhaps the Masons, perhaps Habitat for Humanity, perhaps a professional condo board, they could come in there and assist the condo board members and the residents in there just to make sure this runs a little bit more smoothly and to sort of grease out with anybody, without anyone having to be foreclosed on. So that's basically what we're asking today, is for the council to endorse the idea of exploring the possibility of assigning or having somebody else come in, help with the management, and that may include assigning the second mortgages to a third party and devolving all of the responsibilities for the Bayside Place.
Thank you very much for your report and for bringing a lot more clarity to the project for me. I think the date is a little out. It was, I think this happened before 2012, because when I was on council in 2010, it was already in place.
2009.
Yeah. I do believe, though, the first people that started to move in,
Oh.
if I'm not mistaken, was 2012. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was initially discussed in 2009, and then it went into development, was built, and then 2011 or 2012 was when folks first started moving in.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you for presenting this. I appreciate it. Is part of the issue disagreement between owners and renters on the property? Is that driving this?
There is contention, and it is between the owners who see people coming into the units that they know do not own these units. They're coming in and they see people coming in, they see strangers, and yet on the flip side, people are being forced, they basically, in order to make their mortgage payments,
Yes.
they need help. So,
Your Worship, I am prepared to move a motion that council provide authorization to pursue an alternative for the ongoing responsibility of the Affordable Housing Stewardship of Bayside Place project with a third party. And if I might speak to the issue briefly.
Okay, thank you.
I really appreciate the fact that there is a different sensibility during COVID, very, very definitely, and so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to balance that off against the needs of people. Homelessness in this community is become acute. We're seeing the overnight shelter is seeing 15 people a night to the maximum. And by far the majority of these are local people. The parking lot very often is also has people sleeping in their vehicles with full knowledge of and cooperation among all kinds of people who are providing supports, and it is not going away soon. And so I really appreciate the sensibilities around this that administration has taken. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much for that. So we have a motion on the floor. Oh, Councillor Sobel, you
I
have?
think there's lots of people before me.
Oh, okay, so we have discussion points. Okay, sorry. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hi, Alan. I just want to thank you as well for taking the time to go into this. I think that the reasoning behind what was developed here can't get lost. It's extremely important. When you say that the town had to approve them based on their incomes and so on and so forth, one of the other things that they had to have was they had to be approved for a mortgage on their own as well, correct?
that is correct. So typically what would happen is that a person would go to a real estate agent, just as you would for any other property. You would go and you take a look at the property, and then you'd have to come to the town, myself, and qualify. You have to have an income that is less than 130% of what's called the core needs income threshold in the province in order to qualify for the property. And then you have to go and get a conventional mortgage. So for a lot of folks, it's kind of like threading the eye of the needle. You have to have an income that's low enough to qualify, but high enough to get that conventional mortgage. So that's really, I think, where a lot of people were getting blocked out, because that's kind of a tough flight path for many people.
Well, I really appreciate it. I definitely do not want to see us go down the path of foreclosure, so whatever we can do to avoid that, I'd
I agree.
appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Corbio.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you again for bringing this report. I completely agree with what the other councillor said. I know affordable living is very, in short quantity in this town, and this, like foreclosures and stuff, that's not really the town's book of business. So I really appreciate the alternative, and I am definitely in support of this.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you. I didn't quite catch where you're from and what your position
Oh,
is.
sorry.
Do you mind just telling us?
My name is Alan Dunn. I'm actually the manager of assessment and tax for the town of Strathmore. And one of my other related duties is to sort of be the gatekeeper of this project. So I'm the one who, when they come in, I ensure that people meet that income criteria. And then also when they transfer the property, that the second mortgage is either transferred to the new owner, or alternatively, if they have purchased the property but they do not qualify. Perhaps one of the things I should mention is that if a person does not meet the income criteria after a property is listed for 120 days, you can still purchase a property there. So the way it works is for the first 120 days, you can sell your property for no more than $1,000 less than an appraisal that the person gets. And it can only be sold to somebody who qualifies for the program. After 120 days, the property can be sold to anyone, regardless of whether they qualify for the program or not. As a matter of fact, we've had one unit in there that has been sold to a non-qualifying buyer who, after the 120 days, was able to purchase the property. In that particular case, the second mortgage is actually returned to the town rather than transferred to the owner. If you do not qualify for the program, you do not get the benefit of the second mortgage.
Thank you, Alan. I really appreciate that, and it's a pleasure to meet you.
Very good to meet you.
I think that pride of ownership is the one thing in that community that stands out for me. There were so many people that were just a little bit fearful of what that would mean for Strathmore in that area, being close to a school. And I remember back in 2009 when this was coming to council, it was a contentious issue. And I'm really impressed with the way that you're handling it right now and supporting the homeowners, because I think that we need to bend a little bit. So have there been other people that you've brought into the equation up till now in terms of negotiation between the landowners and the renters? Or is this the first step?
This is really the first step. I broached this subject with my boss, and we've been back and forthing because we also do not want to foreclose on these folks. But yet we do see the flip side of the matter. So this is it can be a tough one. It's a tough one. So I think they could really benefit for some type of third party to come in there and facilitate the way in which things are handled in there. I really do think so.
And have you explored other third parties, or is this in their wheelhouse of expertise, like someone like Habitat for Community?
We're just sort of thinking about it right now. I don't think we've made any sort of steps towards any sort of discussions or anything of that nature. I think this is just the first step to get towards that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Mr. Legore, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, in answer to Councillor Bauer's question, we are going to look at any third party that could be a possible. We're just starting down that road at this time.
Thank you for that, Mr. Legore. Thank you for your report on this and for bringing clarity to it. I do want to acknowledge the council that did this. I think it was a really noble effort to bring home ownership to people who are in the vulnerable population as far as income. But I do appreciate, trying to remove Strathmore, the town of Strathmore, more from it. So I appreciate all the work you're doing on that. Councillor Sobel?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for that. And obviously, I'm supportive of anything rather than foreclosure. But I'm curious in that regard. I've been trying to rack my brains, and But I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that it was the province of Alberta that supplied the grant for the second mortgage.
If I'm not mistaken, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was a combined financing effort between the town and I know the province, as you said, provided a significant grant to it as well. And perhaps Mel?
So I'll just, so it's not even a question, but it's just something to consider if we ever, I'm just wondering whether there's any conditions on that grant that we should be aware of before we go down any other roads.
That's a very good question.
And that's all I wanted to bring up, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So, Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for the report. One question I have is, so if the town were to assign the mortgages to a third party, how does that work as far as like the mortgages being paid off in the future? Does that money get transferred back to the town? And then how does like future mortgages work for qualification and who supplies those?
I think that the way that it's currently envisioned is that the process would remain essentially the same, that the town would be the ones that would have the money will be returned back to the town. But I'm going to be honest with you, I think that might be something that'll take place during the discussions. In order for somebody to take on this project, perhaps there might have to be some sort of different arrangement in terms of the mortgage. I'm not certain.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. So I believe we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Worship Council.
That brings us to item 10, committee reports. 10.1, reports from councillors from committees in which they sit. Any reports, Councillor Sobel?
I do, Your Worship. And my report tonight is on Traffic Advisory Committee. So this committee presently consists of 3 public members, including the transportation manager from Golden Hills School Division, a member of the RCMP, a member of our municipal enforcement team, a town councillor, and 2 town administration employees. This committee is focused on enhancing safety on our municipal roadways. The committee meetings have returned to a normal schedule, although they remain virtual in nature. I would like to recap some of the more recent projects that this committee has been involved in. A subcommittee was formed to analyze the possibility of combining school and playground zones in town. The main issue in this matter is that one of our school zones is located on a provincially maintained highway, Secondary 817. As a result, the committee have recently decided that combining school and playground zones was not a viable option. 2, the committee continues to review school bus route maps in order to determine a proper criteria for crosswalks that pertain to school bus stops. 3, a summertime bicycle safety program was scheduled. However, due to COVID pandemic, it will be considered for 2021. 4, to ease traffic issues on Brent Boulevard at the curling rink, a no left turn was installed at that location and appears to be working very well. 5, at the request of the committee, a deer crossing advisory sign has been installed at George Freeman Trail south of the school. 6, once again, as a result of the committee's concerns, Alberta Transportation has recently agreed to taking some action with the traffic lights located at Highway 1 and George Freeman Trail. I don't think they're there anymore, but that was a joke, they got knocked out. Anyway, in short order, the yellow light that precedes the red light will be extended in length, making it hopefully a safer intersection. 7, as a result of the committee's concerns, Alberta Transportation has also agreed to take on a traffic study of the intersection of Highway 1 and Westmount Road. This will be at no cost to the town. 8, municipal enforcement and infrastructure will conduct a traffic study of Archie Kleiber Trail to determine whether it meet the criteria for reduced speed. 9, the committee is very supportive of the town's RFB program, also known as the Pedestrian Flashing Lights Program. At present, the budget allows for 2 new sets of lights to be installed each year. Unfortunately, there was a long list of potential locations, and the committee would support increasing the amount of allowable pedestrian flashing lights at locations known to be safety concerns sooner rather than later. And I'll be bringing this matter to council during budget talks later this month or early next month. And finally, one of the committee's older projects involving the installation of a traffic safety slogan sign along Wheatland Trail for a 1-year period using a budget approved by council. The results of the survey done pertaining to that sign were recently received. There were about 60 people who responded A majority of respondents felt the sign positively influenced their driving awareness and behavior. A large majority of respondents did advise that they were aware of the presence of the sign, which was good to hear. And most felt that a sign using humor was most likely to influence them or to take notice of the sign. And that's my report on Traffic Advisory Committee, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson, do you have a question, or Councillor Corbett?
No, Your Worship. I have a request regarding a report from Wheatland Housing Management Body. And the request is that that administration place the ad for the communication consultation process that is being carried out by Barry Architecture on our website. I'm just making that request of administration. And the other thing is that this particular week, the issue that they are discussing is regarding how does the built environment promote healthy living and sustainable communities. And so this week, the discussion will focus on the idea of neighborhoods and resident suites. So that's something that's of considerable interest to people that are that either have family going or people that may be looking at senior living themselves. So that is Thursday, October 22nd, and there is I sent it out to CAO Lagore today. And I'm hopeful that it can be posted, that the invitation can be posted on the town's media, if that's a possibility, so that people can access that. And that's all I had, Your Worship. And we've had excellent participation, by the way, in the consultative process so far.
Thank you very much. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to highlight one item from the emergency management. We always get the minutes, and that is fine. I want to highlight that at Strathmore alerts, 1/6 of the households in Strathmore are signed up for Strathmore alerts, so that's huge in my mind.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Worship. Yesterday, I was able to attend as a trustee for the library board, a meeting, and there will be a forthcoming report to council on November 4th, because I just didn't get it in for today's meeting. However, I did want to make a public thanks through our CAO, or to our CAO, for the amount of work that's been done at the library from by our town staff. The board and the library director, Rachel Dick Hughes, just wishes to really sincerely thank all of the people that have been instrumental in moving audiovisual equipment, putting additional double doors in for the handicapped exits and entrances, curbside pickup. There has been additional communications made to replace lights in the main area of the library with LEDs. And every time that our town staff are at the library, they are efficient and they communicate well. And our director just can't say enough good things about the response time if she has any issues. So I just would like to pass that on to Trent West, Mark Pretzloff, and then she also mentioned someone named Shane, Doug. And that's everything. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much for that report. Any other reports? Councillor Cox?
No, I was just going to move those reports that council adopt those reports for information, Your Worship.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Motion is carried. And that brings us to item 11, items directly related to council. 11.1, notice of motion from Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. My item has to do with a council code of conduct complaint that I am submitting. And it is as follows. Whereas at the regular council meeting on July 22nd, as well as the regular council meeting on September 2nd, Councillor Peterson made several statements and conducted herself in a way that I believe violated council code of conduct, as well as the procedure bylaw 16-18. I allege that Councillor Peterson violated Section 4.1D, Section 5.4, and Section 5.5, and Section 8.2 of our Code of Conduct, which relate to unprofessional conduct, the making of false and misleading statements, as well as bullying and intimidation toward other council members. I allege that she has violated Section 60D and Section 60E of the Council Procedure Bylaw, which relates to disorderly conduct, disturbing the proceedings of council, and refusing to assume personal responsibility for a statement quoted and providing the source of information upon request. I allege that Councillor Peterson violated Section 153E of the Municipal Government Act related to the release of confidential information. It is incumbent on council to diligently investigate any reported violations of protocols and regulations that govern council's behavior and ensure that we are held to the standards expected by our residents. Therefore, I move that council conduct an investigation on the complaint received from me, Councillor Montgomery, on this date regarding the aforementioned alleged breaches of protocol by Councillor Peterson.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor regarding council investigation. Jennifer, is there any advice or anything that administration can offer or weigh in on procedures? Are we good there?
Yeah, your worship. So according to council code of conduct, the process is being followed that a complaint is being submitted to council. And council needs to decide on whether or not they want to investigate or appoint a third party to investigate the complaint.
And do you have anything you'd like to add as far as council investigation versus third party?
My motion asks for council to investigate. Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Legore, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did talk to legal counsel. We wanted to make sure that we handle this properly when it comes forward. We wanted to make sure we're following our own bylaws, our own codes, etc. And in our discussions with them, I said to him that we should have this done by a third party, and legal counsel absolutely endorses that. It's almost impossible for council to investigate one of its own members without having a bias of one way or the other. So my recommendation to council is that you amend this motion to engage a third party to undertake the investigation.
Councillor Cox?
Your worship, I don't know who I asked this of, but I'm assuming Doug. What would a third-party investigation cost, Doug?
It can cost you anywhere from $15,000 and up.
Councillor Sobel?
Thank you, and thank you for that, Mr. Legore. It's good advice from legal counsel. I could never support this council investigating. There's clear bias involved, in my opinion here, and I just don't know how this would work. We need somebody with some experience in investigating. We don't want this. I mean, we want the truth to come out. We want the facts to come out, but we don't want this to be a kangaroo court where we're investigator, judge, and I don't want to say executioner, but penalizer, I guess. There's got to be some fairness and some third party involved in determining the facts. So I could never support this, but I would certainly support an amendment to direct administration to hire an independent third party investigator.
Thank you for that. Any other comments from council? Councillor Montgomery, would you accept a friendly amendment to have a third-party investigation based on advice from legal and recommendation from our administration?
I personally don't believe it'd be responsible to spend $15,000 or more to investigate this issue. For the public, I have submitted, along with my allegations, I've submitted the evidence and information that go along with these allegations. So I encourage you to look at that so that you can get an idea of how clear cut this is. This is black and white. It's not much of it. Out of 8 allegations, many of them are not open to interpretation. They are black and white violations. So I believe that it would be a waste of money, and it would be poor use of the taxpayers' money to hire a third party to investigate this. As far as how council, I believe personally that most of council would deal with this in an objective and unbiased way. I'm the person making the allegations and submitting the complaint. So I guess you could say that I'm biased because I do believe that these are credible allegations. And I guess I would be willing to listen to my fellow councilors and their feelings on this matter.
I just have a question then, as far as, I just have one question, then I'll go to Councillor Cox and Corbeil. Would you, if this passed, would you exclude yourself from the investigation, since you've just said it's open and, or it's a very clear cut and you've already made your decision? You've already expressed a bias as far as the investigation would go if council conducted it.
Your Worship, I would not have submitted these complaints if I did not believe that they were very true and real. If you want to call that a bias, then I guess that's a bias, but I would not make idle. I'm not here to do a drive-by character assassination similar to what was done to me on September 2nd by Councillor Sobel and Councillor Peterson, which is why I'm looking to submit a formal complaint and actually have a proper investigation done so that this can be dealt with properly.
I wasn't accusing you of anything. I was just saying, if you state, if you bring forward 7 allegations and then you state that it's clear cut, to me, it demonstrates a bias that you've already made up your mind, and I don't think legal advice would allow for that or would advise you to be a part of that. And the other thing that I find concerning is we're going against the advice of our law firm to conduct a council inquiry or a council investigation versus a third party. So I have some worries about going against legal advice. We'll go to Councillor Cox and we can come back to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Jennifer's already told us that council can conduct an investigation. I just want to know, Jennifer, do you have any idea as to how that looks?
Your Worship, honestly, no, not at this time. We would have to, perhaps Doug may have better insight on how that would look internally. I believe he's been involved in doing investigations, but we've never run across this, so I'd have to do a little research into that, Councillor Cox.
Thank you.
Mr. Legore.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it puts staff in an extremely difficult position. The staff is going to have to interview all council members that were present at the meeting. And then however way they rule, whether they uphold the complaint or declare the complaint frivolous and non-founded, it's going to put staff in an awkward position with some members of council. Some will agree and some won't agree. So it puts them in a very, very awkward spot. These things to be done internally are almost impossible because there is biases, there's no question. You listen to the conversation that council is having right now, you can see that there is some bias. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, that's just the facts that it is. So you're putting your staff in an impossible situation to expect them to conduct this investigation.
I don't believe I'm suggesting that staff investigate anything. I'm suggesting that council sit down and we discuss these allegations, and then we determine if my allegations are in fact valid, and then we would go from there. I don't believe that staff should be involved at all. And I guess to respond to Mayor Fuel's earlier points, I would not recuse myself because I'm a member of this council and I'm entitled to act as in that role. And I would not say I'm unduly or unfairly biased. As I said, I'm submitting the complaint. I would not idly submit a complaint that I did not believe was valid. And I'll give you an example. When Councillor Peterson made a statement that purported to speak for a couple of members of council, I asked her to provide that source, and she refused. That is a clear...
Point of order, Your Worship. We're going into an investigation here and providing evidence of what transpired. I don't see any reason why we should be doing this at this stage. We're on a different... Could I...
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. We're starting to get into the investigation even before we voted on whether we can have the investigation. So, Doug, Mr. Legore.
To you, Mr. Mayor, if council wants to do this themselves, I would suggest that you go into a closed session and have the debate, if that's what you intend to do. But think about, what is the outcome? What are you really trying to do here, and what's the end result? You know, is there some way you can talk this through and come to a resolve? Think about those things. It's going to be very difficult for council to do even themselves. But I understand where Councillor Montgomery's coming from, where he does not want to spend the money for the investigation and thinks council can do it. Yes, that could happen, but I think it'll be very difficult for you to do that, just as it would be for staff.
My question is, I would want to seek a legal opinion on if we do it in camera just ourselves. I would like legal opinion as to whether Councillor Montgomery could be a part of the investigation, since he's brought forward the allegations and he's already said in public tonight that it's a clear-cut decision. It's a clear-cut thing. So I would like us to get a legal opinion on who was allowed to be a part of the investigation.
Your Worship, if I might. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Legore.
Mr. Legore?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we could do that. If this motion passes the way it's worded, council then could direct administration to get a legal opinion on that very issue. And I'm going to be very honest with you here. There's probably others that say this is very cut and dry to them and these allegations are unfounded, or they're not totally correct one way or the other, doesn't matter. So you could end up excusing quite a few people from the discussion.
The other thing that is important is if we investigate this on our own, there may indeed be some form of punishment or reprimand. And again, I come back to the idea, like you have just said, if councillors have demonstrated a bias and they're part of the decision-making to lay out some sort of punishment or reprimand, demonstrating the bias before is, to me, is very problematic. So I would want to get a legal opinion as to, because there could indeed be some form of reprimand for the councillor, and I would want to make sure we're doing everything proper. Jennifer, you have your hand up, and then we'll go to Councillor Montgomery, and then I think some of the others would like to be heard.
I'm sorry. Another item that council may want to consider is that the member, and it's within your code of conduct bylaw, it's it's under complaints, section I. It says a member who is subject of an investigation is entitled to be represented by legal counsel at the member's expense. So council must also consider that if that legal counsel could be engaged in this, and whether or not that plays into a factor on whether or not you want to conduct this investigation on your own. without that support.
Okay, let's go to Councillor Montgomery and then Mr. Legore, and then I'll start going to the other councillors who want to speak.
Thank you. So I'm not getting into any sort of investigation. I'm reading straight from our agenda, so this is public knowledge. So again, when I requested that Councillor Peterson provide the source behind her statement that I knew to be false, she refused. That is a clear violation of procedure bylaw 60.
Yes, I will allow that point of order. We are starting to get into the specifics of the allegations brought up by you. I realize that it's in the public agenda, but we're starting to discuss the validity of those allegations, and that becomes an investigation even before we've passed a motion to investigate as a council. So to me, we cannot discuss these different item points, and I know you're trying to prove that the points are valid, but those would be proved in an actual investigation, not in the discussion of whether we're actually going to approve an investigation.
Your Worship, I had to submit these items to council so that council had a basis on which to decide whether or not to go ahead with the investigation. So these are essentially just preliminary kind of information as for why council should investigate these.
But I don't mean to interrupt you, but if these 7 are there and we're going to start discussing them, then we're going to start arguing as a council that's about which ones are not valid. Because, for example, I have an opinion very strongly on one of them that would go against whether it's a valid allegation, but then we start to get into the actual discussion and the actual investigation right here before we've even passed it. I understand these were brought forward to us to understand better what you're bringing forward, but to discuss each of them now makes it the investigation.
I certainly wouldn't try to speak to any that are open to interpretation. The September 2nd meeting was recorded on video, and therefore the public can go and watch that video to see that what I'm saying is black and white. It's in the video. There's no interpretation.
There is, though, and I'll give you an example, Councilman.
I'm speaking about number 6, Your Worship. That's what I'm talking about.
But some of the others are not black and white.
No, and that's why I'm only referring to the ones that are black and white.
Point of order, Your Worship.
Where there is specific information about that.
I disagree
May I speak to the point of order, Your Worship?
Yes.
The issue before us is whether or not we are going to have council conduct this investigation or a third party. That's the issue at the heart of this matter, of this discussion. It shouldn't be going in any other location other than to determine and discuss whether or not one of those two options should be used.
Actually, my motion is to investigate Councillor Peterson as a council. That's what the motion was.
Yes, that is your motion. So we have a motion on the floor, and there is discussion about the actual motion as to whether or not we're going to have a council-led or a council investigation. So to get into proving the validity of certain items, to me, and I believe this, puts us into the investigation right away. It puts us into discussing and possibly arguing about the items, and that makes it an investigation even before we've actually passed the motion to have a council investigation. And I still have concerns that we're going against our legal advice by going for a council investigation. Mr. Legore, can you hang on 1 minute? Or did you want to speak to that?
You can go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Legore.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the other bit of caution I would advise council is Rocky View County went through this very recently. I'm sorry I don't have the results of that right before me, but their council was chastised for not handling it well. So be very cautious how we do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually don't mind Doug's suggestion of doing a closed session meeting. I think that this council has a few issues that maybe we can discuss, and maybe we don't have to have more incidents like this in public. Like, if we can talk about these, think about what we want to do, and then maybe we can have somewhere to go after that, because it just seems like there's notice of motion after notice of motion after notice of motion, and I don't know what the outcomes that people are wanting in the end, and maybe we can put an end, I guess, to everything. That I wouldn't mind, and I don't mind that suggestion at all from Mr. Legore.
I understand your motivation and your comments. My big concern, again, is we've heard it in public now, it's a matter of record, that we'll be going against legal advice from our law firm to investigate ourselves instead of their recommendation, a strong recommendation, to have a third party be brought in. Councillor Bauer. Sorry, I'll come back.
I'm struggling with the way that this is rolling out for a couple reasons. I would like to know kind of the process, if I could ask Councillor Montgomery, on how you came to have this in a public meeting as opposed to dealing with it privately, which would be typically the more respectful way of handling things. So what is your rationale behind that?
I can speak to that, Your Worship. It was certainly, Councillor Montgomery did make a...
Councillor Peterson, I'm just going to allow Councillor Montgomery to answer the question that was posed directly to him, if you're okay with that. Councillor Corbeil, can you? Yep.
Thank you very much for that question. As Councillor Peterson was probably about to say, I have made numerous attempts to try to resolve this privately. The last thing that I wanted to do was to have this become a public issue or to waste council's time or the public's time with this issue. Those attempts to resolve this privately were refused. And yeah, even after having them refused, I still did make the attempt because I do believe that it would have been better to have resolved this privately. So that is how I came to be in this position.
And I can offer some because I was a part of trying to broker a meeting between the two. Councillor Peterson did feel that it was very important to have this dealt with in public because working in the background doesn't let the public become aware of some of these things that have been brought up. However, I think the issue at hand right now is we have a motion on the floor to investigate as a council, and we have legal advice from our law firm saying that they strongly recommend that we do not do that and that we have a third party hired to investigate. So if you vote in favor of this motion, you're voting and going against legal advice. Did you have another one you wanted to say? Okay, Councillor Bauer is still up.
So if I'm looking correctly at Councillor Montgomery's motion, it says regarding the aforementioned alleged breaches of protocol. If I'm able to decide if we should conduct an investigation on the complaint, I'm wondering why all of these alleged breaches are not being read out. Like, I don't understand, if this is public, why Councillor Sobel keeps doing a point of order when I thought Councillor Montgomery had 10 minutes, according to our policy, to read exactly what the breaches were. And so, and the reason I'm saying this is because I have been through a third-party investigation with one of our current councillors previous to this, and it was brought to my attention at that time that, we can always do better. And I don't know whether or not we reviewed the allegations appropriately before going into what ended up costing us $25,000 at the time. And so I don't want to go into another serious third-party investigation that could potentially put us into that realm of expenses unless all the allegations are brought forward so that it's out on the table and that Councillor Montgomery's part of the investigation, and any staff that was, or council members that were affected by this are also adequately investigated. So that would be my, my personal hope if we were to go to a third party. But I'm thinking that the amount of money that was spent on the previous investigation, I think that we could have done it so much better in-house.
Well, unfortunately, that's a subjective opinion, and we did have a third party that came in with what would be an unbiased view of the things that were done in the spring. As far as having the allegations read, if Councillor Montgomery gets, and I'm not going to identify any one in particular, but if Councillor Montgomery gets to a certain item and one of the councillor disagrees with it and starts to argue against that or speak against it, then we're in an investigation, and we haven't even passed the motion to be an investigation. Because once we see these allegations and they're read out and the motion is there, then we're going to start to discuss them, because there are a few that, there are already a few I've written down, I've written copious notes. There are some that I don't feel are as clear cut. And so if that's the case, then we start to discuss and we start to investigate. Just as the allegations are read, we begin to argue and discuss them. So I think our motion on the floor is, what type of investigation is it going to be? Is it going to be a council-led one, or is it going to be a third-party one? And I know we paid a lot of money for a third-party investigation, but I believe the public wants us to do things the absolute right way. And we need to be held to a high standard. And if these allegations are as strong as Councillor Montgomery feels, we should ensure that both parties are dealt with fairly and that we have no bias brought in. Because one of the things I have spoken against as far as this motion on the floor is, if you're going to have a council-led investigation, who makes up that investigation? And I already feel that Councillor Montgomery has demonstrated some bias already.
Your worship, if it makes it easier, if Councillor Peterson would agree to bow out, then I will also bow out, so that there's...
So there would be 5 of us investigating. Now, again, it comes back to, is this council prepared to go against the advice of our town law firm and do this investigation? Councillor Bauer, did you have anything else you wanted to say? I was just trying to explain what I thought would happen if we started to discuss these allegations. It would basically become the investigation.
I would like to give others a chance to speak, Your Worship.
Okay, Councillor Peterson?
Your Worship, I guess I would like to hear from council how, in the interest of justice, what is the cost of justice? Councillor Cox had one charge of unprofessional conduct, and we decided as a council that it would not be fair to her for us to judge that. That was the justice that we decided on, and the point at which we went forward. So I'd like to hear from council why they think that that was justice and that this is not. I'd really be interested in hearing from council regarding that.
Councillor Corbeil?
Thank you, Your Worship. My thing wasn't to go and do this, sit down and investigate, but my suggestion was to go in camera to hash it out, if you would say, or whatever. And then if we can't, maybe discuss where we can go from there. I don't even care if we want a mediator in there, to actually control kind of some of the situation. I'm not sure either way. I just think that there's going to be a whole lot. I think that there's more issues than what's coming forward right now, and I just want the issues to stop so that we can move forward.
Councillor Sobel?
Just very quickly, it's a great idea, and I think it would have been a plausible one 3 weeks ago. But these matters are in the public forum now. So that councillor's got a number of allegations against her, and there are already suggestions that this is an open and shut case. Let's bring on the penalty stage. Things don't work like that. That's not fair. Yeah, I think she deserves a proper hearing and a proper investigation on these things. If anybody thinks that this council is going to do a proper investigation on this, you got a second thing coming. It ain't going to happen. It's unfair. And I just like everybody to get into her position and see what you would like if you'd like to be tried and convicted by your peers in this fashion. It's not fair. The only way we can do this is with an independent investigator.
Councillor Cox, and then we can come back to Councillor Peterson.
So I can speak to that because it has happened to me. And if you are asking my honest opinion, I would 150% rather do what Councillor Corbill has suggested and sit around a table and discuss it. If we need a mediator there, fine. I do not believe that a third-party investigation would be any more fair. There is no hearing. So there is not an opportunity to hear sides in an investigation, third-party investigation. So fairness, you're speaking Greek because that's not what happened. In our code of conduct or in our procedure bylaws, Jennifer has confirmed that we are allowed to do a council investigation. We have no idea what that consists of, so maybe, as Melanie has suggested, and as the Glegoras suggested, closed session with just us, where we can discuss it. We can come back into the public and decide and announce what happened from that investigation, like adults, come back out, say, you know what, we worked it out, all's fair, all's good, and Councillor Peterson and Councillor Montgomery can be part of the discussions so that we can come to a place where we are all happy.
In answer to one of your things, you said that you didn't feel it was fair. I don't understand how a third party who comes in and has no vested interest in anything can be seen as unfair. And again, I come back to this idea that our own legal counsel is strongly recommending that we have an outside third party investigate this issue. And we're going to go against legal advice and try to invest. And if we sit down informally or try to sit down informally as a group, we're going to get into discussion of the allegations, and then that's an investigation. There is no more opportunity to do it informally and just have a visit and chat about stuff. It's going to be an investigation done by council, and I guess that's the motion on the floor. But I just want to remind everybody that if you vote for this, you're going against our legal advice. And we've set a precedent that there was incidents that happened earlier, and we decided the most fair thing to do was have an outside third-party investigation, and now we're going to turn away from that, and in this situation, we're going to do it ourselves because the majority votes for that. The majority may vote for that, but is it fair? Is it prudent to go against legal advice? I don't think so, but Councillor Corbill.
Thank you, Worship. Our legal advice was to either council investigate or third party. It had nothing to do with asking about a closed session. Like, that wasn't part of the legal advice.
No, the legal advice was he strongly recommended a third-party investigation, not a council investigation.
Right, but what I'm suggesting is neither or. I'm not talking about council investigation. I'm talking about council sitting down to figure out where we want to be and how we want to get there.
But can we do that now that it's all in the public domain? There are allegations printed, there are points that have been touched on briefly and gone away from. Can we do that?
You know what? As bad as it is, we did it to Councillor Montgomery. We spoke about this in public and everything else, and there was no investigation, there was no end result, there was nothing like that neither. So it's not like this is our only one.
I'm a little confused on that one.
With the notice of motion that was kind of canceled that he handled under between council statements, that was all public as well. when Councillor Sobel brought forward that one, so like, this isn't an isolated incident where someone's been, and that's what I'm saying. I think that there's going to be more of those coming forward. I thought if we sat down and had a council thing, maybe all of this could end.
Your worship?
Councillor Peterson.
So Councillor Montgomery has, put out a long list of allegations, and it looks very, very much like this council is not interested in a third-party investigation. And so, Councillor Montgomery has been very, very forceful in stating his position. And I am not in any way as forceful, but, and I had no intentions of speaking tonight, because, I did believe that this council would be fair and that they would call forth a third-party investigation. But in my opinion, that's not going to happen. So I would like very much an opportunity to respond to the allegations at this point, if you would entertain that, Your Worship.
Jennifer, can I turn to you for some advice? We have a motion on the floor. It's no longer a notice of motion, it's an actual motion to have council investigate, correct? So that gives Councillor Peterson an opportunity to respond. I know we're in the discussion phase since the motion is on the floor.
Your Worship, I could be corrected, but in my opinion, the Councillor Peterson could respond to the motion that's on the floor to investigate or not. I believe that Councillor Montgomery wanted to read aloud the allegations. And if we allow Councillor Peterson to respond to the allegations, I'm not sure if that process.
So you're saying she could only speak or respond to the motion as far as a council investigation? It would be focused on that?
That's the ruling of the chair, but my recommendation would be that Councillor Peterson would respond to the motion that's on the floor.
Councillor Peterson?
So I will respond to the motion and in all of its parts, Your Worship. Is that satisfactory to you?
The motion, the final motion as far as the investigation of the complaint?
I'm just looking, the motion in its entirety, because it lays out all the charges. So I would respond.
Oh, you mean all the whereases?
Yeah, so I would, and it lays out all the different charges.
Jennifer, that would be okay because they're all laid out in the motion on the floor.
Your Worship, if that's the motion on the floor, then yes.
Pardon me, Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay, so we have advice from our legislative person on council meeting protocols and discussing motions, and she is saying that it would be okay for Councillor Peterson to speak on each of the paragraphs that deal with the sections that you feel were violated.
So are we not getting into a point of order, Your Worship? Isn't that exactly the debate that you were talking about earlier, that you didn't want to be done? And then we would be doing that by going through? It seems contradictory to what.
This does seem very confusing.
Yeah, it seems just contradictory to what you wanted before.
The only part of it that looks to be a motion is this, be it resolved.
That's my motion.
So that is the motion, but the motion has context, Your Worship. And I'm fine with Councillor Montgomery reading out his statement and then responding. I'm fine with that.
You're fine with him?
I just don't think that we can make a decision, Your Worship, without having the full case. Like, I don't think there's any justice in Councillor Montgomery presenting what he's presented and what's been on the books now for several weeks without having a response to that. I think in justice, there is a point of justice there.
This is incredibly difficult because I can see Councillor Bauer's point. If we discuss, for example, if we discuss the Code of Conduct Bylaw 1908, or we discuss Section 5.4, 5.5, if you speak on that, are we then getting into the actual investigation? And I believe we would be.
Your Worship, if I might.
Councillor Montgomery. Yeah, Councillor Peterson, could you turn off your red mic just for a moment?
Thank you. So I believe Councillor Sobel asked if I would accept an amendment for a third party to investigate. And I believe Councillor Peterson said that she would support that as well. And I'm under the impression that you would also support that.
Well, I have spoken, I have discussed against the motion. Primarily, my discussion has been my concern with going against legal advice to have a council-only investigation. So yes, I guess what you're saying is I am definitely leaning towards a third-party investigation, and I believe the person who's being accused is comfortable with that. Or would you be okay if Councillor Peterson, if I allow her to speak to your, did you want to finish your sentence or your views, your idea?
Yeah, I guess I'm willing to consider, what I believe is I believe these allegations. I would not, as I said, I would not make idle accusations. I am not trying to do a drive-by character assassination that was done to me. So if, I have no doubt whatsoever that a third party would look at this, they would look at the black and white information that I presented, and they would say, yes, these are clearly violations of these protocols. I have no question whatsoever. I don't think it's worth spending $15,000 on, personally, but I want to see this process move forward because I believe that something should be done about this behavior.
So can I ask you again, which I asked at the very start, would you be willing to accept an amendment to that where council would hire a third party to conduct an investigation into the matter? Yes,
I will accept that amendment. However, if the motion fails for some reason, I will just be making my original motion. But yes, I will accept an amendment that council appoint a third party that is council's choice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peterson, are you?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to say that I am in agreement with a third-party independent investigation if council so desires. And I also believe that a third-party investigation, although it would have cost associated, I think it would guarantee validity. It guarantees validity in the face of the public, which is not going to happen if council does this. And it would assist council. I also think it would assist council in a way forward. We've been discussing how we can revamp our procedural bylaws. We've also been talking about how we can take a really close look about how we roll out with our code of conduct, something that Councillor Cox addressed much earlier and with great validity and passion, and I think that that's important. I also want to say that the allegations that are here by Councillor Montgomery, I say with full honesty that I welcome scrutiny, fullest scrutiny. And I absolutely disagree with Councillor Montgomery on many of these points. And we'll just see where it rolls out. And you know what? If this comes forward and they say, Councillor Peterson, you were wrong, I will apologize publicly, I'll apologize in writing, and I will make sure that the due diligence is done. And I really appreciate that Councillor Montgomery has agreed to an amendment.
And I imagine the third party would make a recommendation as far as what the repercussion or the any form of, they would be the ones who would recommend some form of discipline or reprimand for the councillor. I appreciate, Councillor Montgomery, the fact that you're willing to accept that amendment. And Councillor Corbeil, you've worked really hard today to try to get us to informally do this. This might be a step forward too in getting us to deal with this issue. I don't know if there are other issues that may come forward, but we now have this agreement to accept an amendment. Councillor Bauer, did you want to jump in?
Yes, please, Your Worship. And my reluctance with the third-party investigation stem from the investigation that was done on Councillor Cox. And I heard her say today that she feels that there were things that were done unfairly, and I would like to know, could you How could we be more intentional with this third-party investigation in including all of the people that are involved that perhaps would address what you said was not fair? Do you know what I'm trying to get at?
I'll clarify. So, to clarify, I'm not saying that the third-party investigation was unfair. I'm saying that Councillor Sobel indicated that there would be a hearing, that would make it fair. And there was no hearing in a third-party investigation.
So when your investigation was happening, did you have an opportunity to speak on your own behalf against the allegations?
I guess that's a matter of interpretation. I was interviewed.
Okay, so your worship, what I'm trying to get at is I would just like to make sure that we have a third-party investigator that does not have bias, that is willing to investigate all parties involved. I think that there were some parties that were excluded in the last investigation, and I would like to make sure that that doesn't happen this time. So I would be willing to vote for a third-party investigation as long as we are able to make sure that everyone has their appropriate time to be able to be heard.
And I think that's what we would all want to do. And as far as a council investigation, to be honest, if we'd have done a council investigation in the spring, I think I should have been out because I had some personal emotions and some bias, and it wouldn't have been fair to Councillor Cox at that time if I was a part of the investigation and a part of the reprimand. I was able to step back out of it, let a third party do it, and then the third party made recommendations as far as what needed to be done following that. So I absolutely agree. I would want to make sure we sought out a third party from somewhere else that brings in no vested interest or nothing. They just absolutely keep it clear and keep it black and white as far as their investigation, and it's all done in an unbiased way. So does that satisfy you as far as what I would hope? I'm in agreement with you that I would want to make sure that it's completely unbiased and a third party that would come in from elsewhere. Councillor Peterson and then Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Worship. Can I ask that in the motion, in light of what Councillor Bauer has said and in what Councillor Montgomery has requested, that the motion identify who they would like to hire the third-party investigator? So whether that be, our acting CAO has lots of experience. I know that Mr. Simpson probably has experience in doing that. Our HR probably has experience. And I would ask Mr. Legore, you made mention of the fact that it's really important that we not put staff in an investigative role, but would it be okay to have somebody in the role of actually seeking out a third-party investigator, and who you might recommend that would be a third party without a vested interest?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we would make a recommendation to council giving you an option on investigators, and we tell you what our recommendation is.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you would provide us like a short list for us to choose from, Mr. Legore?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I have Councillor Cox and then Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that I hear you. I understand where you're all coming from, but I am not in favor of spending the dollars for the investigation.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery.
I will leave the motion as it was, where I said that the third party will be of council's choosing. And I guess I would welcome administration to submit some names, and if council has any names they would like to submit, then I believe that would be acceptable as well.
Thank you for that. So we have an amended motion on the floor. Deborah, do you need it read out to you to be official?
Yes, please, if I could get the full resolution read, just to clarify, because we've had several coming out. Thank you.
I will move that council I will move that council appoint a third-party investigator of their choosing to investigate the complaints received from me, Councillor Montgomery, on this date regarding the aforementioned alleged breaches of protocol by Councillor Peterson.
Thank you. So we have the amended motion. Is there discussion on that? Councillor Corbeil?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do just have one thing. Like, I get that a third party will cost money, and I'm fine with a third party costing money. My thing is I don't want to come back next month and have another third party and another third party. That's the only reason that I would really like to sit down with council, figure out our issues, do an investigation on whoever needs to be investigated to move on. That's my only thing. That was why I suggested.
I guess that's going to be the next question. Is there more things coming forward that are going to be done? You know, that's what the public's going to want to know too. Obviously, there are major problems here. I mean, the public is seeing it at home and the media is covering this. They're going to see us with a lot of warts showing right now as a group. Councillor Peterson.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I just think it's good for the public to see the warts. I think that we owe our public that. I think it's really critical that they see how we interact, how we serve them. I think that nothing is more important than how we serve our public, and if we don't do it publicly, they can't possibly know. So I hear what Councillor Corbeil is saying. You know, this next year, this next 361 days, I don't anticipate are going to be very easy, but I do anticipate that they will be in public, and I do anticipate that there will be lots of other investigative issues that probably come out of this, but maybe that's why a third-party investigation is good, because they can bring it forward. And, you know, if we make a pact at the end of this, I think that would be wonderful. Of how we're, you know, because we did have a playbook. This council started out in 2017 or 2016 with a playbook, and it worked really well until it didn't. And, you know, there's a, you know, was it Mike Tyson that said everything is good until you get punched in the face? And so, you know, we've had a few things that punched us in the face. We had our issues with the town hall. We've had our issues that have brought us to this place. And so we've been punched in the face, and how we decide whether we get up and fix it, or whether we keep up with this pettiness, it's in our court. And so I'm happy to move forward in this way.
Councillor Corbeil and then Councillor Montgomery.
Last time I'm going to speak anyways. You know, and I agree, a PACTA may be a way forward. What do we want to get done in this next year? And let's concentrate on those rather than this, and that would be wonderful.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Worship, and I guess I will close debate. My top priority here is to work as hard as I can for the people of Strathmore and for this community, and to make the best decisions possible that I can for this community. I'm dismayed, quite dismayed, that this is where this has come to. I feel that it's totally unnecessary, and I'm disturbed that it had to come to this. As I've said to Councillor Peterson and to Councillor Sobel as well, I would like nothing more than to move on from this and to just basically get back to work. I think that we need to focus on the job at hand, and we need to make sure that we're doing our job. And I don't believe that petty interpersonal squabbles do anything to help the community. In fact, it harms the community. And I'll state publicly right now that all I want is to move forward and to let bygones be bygones and to get back to work. Thank you.
Thank you. So I believe he closed the discussion.
Just a question, are you withdrawing that motion? No. Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's been amended, and that amended motion was read out. So, all in favor of the amended motion? Opposed? So we have 6 in favor and 1 opposed. So the motion carries. And Mr. Legore will be turning to you and Jennifer, our deputy CAO, to come to us with a short list of third-party groups that we could employ to do this council investigation.
Your worship, I just have a
Understood,
point of
Mr. Mayor.
clarification. And it's a question for administration.
Okay.
So I have a long diatribe in response. Long diatribe. Is it okay to just save that for the investigation? Or because of what Councillor Montgomery has put in here, am I obligated to send it out to the public, or can I just hang on to it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would hang on to it for the investigation.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Legore. And that concludes 11.1 and 11.2. I believe they're both put together. 11.3, Strathmore Municipal Building Solar Panels, page 35. Councillor Sobel, are you speaking to this?
I am, Your Worship. This matter's back before council as a result of discussions that I've had within myself and with the Sustainability Committee. The Sustainability Committee is a committee of council focused on coordinating community-wide efforts aimed at fostering the town of Strathmore's sustainability initiatives. It's no wonder that they were extremely supportive and enthused about the prospect of reducing power costs at the new municipal building through the use of roof-based solar panels. It's also no wonder that they were disappointed with council's recent decision to cancel the previously agreed upon project. To be clear, this was a decision based on finances, and I reluctantly supported it. I'm bringing the concept of solar panels for the municipal building back to council and seeking support to have administration investigate a new project that would accomplish this goal in a financially responsible manner. If this motion is supported, I would further invite the administrative person tasked with this project to meet with the Sustainability Committee, as a great deal of knowledge and expertise exists in the area of solar panels. Lastly, I would only like to add that there are a number of grants available to municipalities to invest in solar panels, and I have forwarded them, or I will in a moment, forwarded a number of links to our CAO and administration. Thank you, and I have a motion, Your Worship, when the time is appropriate.
Did you want to make the motion and then we can have discussion following your motion?
Certainly, thank you. I would move that council direct administration to pursue the concept of installing solar panels onto the roof of the new Strathmore Municipal Building, as well as determining what, if any, grants may be available for municipal solar grants.
Thank you for that motion. And now that we have a motion on the floor, is there discussion or questions related to that? Councillor Cox.
I gotta remember. Yes, Your Worship. The question is for Acting CAO Doug Legore. Is it possible for you to find out and let us know when the motion came before us previously and how it was defeated? And, like, was it all, like, were all of us opposed to the solar panels, or was it a split decision? Do we know that?
It passed and then we took it back.
And I
Okay.
think Jennifer has her hand up. She might be able to give you information too, as well as Councillor Corbeil. Jennifer?
Thank you.
So I don't have that information. We can find it here shortly. I think I know where Councillor Cox is coming from in our procedure bylaw. In order to bring a motion back or an item back for consideration or rescinding or amendment, we need a 2/3 vote to reconsider that motion. We would need just a couple minutes here to find the previous motion.
Jennifer, would it help if we took a 2-minute recess?
That would help.
So we're looking for a motion to have a 2-minute recess or a couple of minutes so that Abin can do that. All in favor? And we're in a recess. I'd like to reconvene the public council meeting, and we are currently on 11.3 Strathmore Municipal Building solar panels. We currently have a motion on the floor. And I'm absolutely confused as to where we're going now. Councillor Cox, please help me.
So we're good. We just wanted to make sure that we were doing things right, and we are. So Councillor Sobel's motion is on the floor, and it's good to go ahead. My question was, the reason that it was defeated in the first place was because I believe it was expense. But now Councillor Sobel's motion is requesting information regarding grants. So when you do come back with this on, was there a date, Councillor Sobel? No. It'll be a full report again, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it will be.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cox, and thank you, Mr. Legore. So we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? And the motion is carried. That brings us to 11.4, public surveys polls. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, so I bring this matter before council as a result of a recent motion for first reading of a bylaw dealing with precautionary measures we may have to take if the COVID pandemic was to increase its presence in our community to a point of serious concern. A couple of polls were undertaken prior to the introduction and first reading of the bylaw, one initiated by a member of council and the second by administration. The questions asked in these polls were designed primarily to advise council what Facebook users' thoughts were in regards to the use of face masks. In spite of the fact that the questions were never brought to the attention of council prior to being publicly posted, they gave the impression, and one specifically noted, that these were either requested by or would assist council in their deliberations. My major concern with this process is similar to the concerns many researchers and governance specialists have reported on in regards to polling. It's imperative that the question being asked of the public be accurate and focused on the information being sought. In this particular case, the questions pertain to the wearing of face masks, period. Rightfully, many respondents, and I include persons who sought me out to ask questions on this as well, wanted to know why council was considering mandatory masking at this time and why we felt restrictions were needed in outdoor locations as well. Of course, that was not the case. Our bylaw focused only on indoor public places and vehicles, and only if the need arose. In my opinion, the polling questions asked caused great concern, anger, and angst amongst many residents, including many who reside outside our municipal boundaries. I believe these polls did more harm than good and were irrelevant to the issue before council. I also believe it's time for a policy to be prepared and that would govern the use of polls and surveys, and I'm prepared to make a motion in that regard.
So again, excuse me, like the last one, you could make the motion and then we could have discussion following that.
Yes. If I had my motion here, I would be much happier. Oh. I got it. Thank you, Your Worship. I'd move that council direct the administration to prepare a policy which would govern the process used by administration and town council when there is a determination made to conduct a public survey or a poll.
Thank you, and now we have the motion on the floor. Is there discussion on that? Councillor Montgomery first, and then Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I certainly think that administration should be following some sort of a policy. That just makes sense that administration should be having processes spelled out for these things. I can't support the idea of limiting council's ability to ask the public for feedback on any subject. As Councillor Sobel mentioned, there was a recent Facebook poll, and I guess the good thing about polls is that council is free to regard or disregard the results of any poll that they feel is not legitimate. I personally wouldn't, there's, I guess, certain social media that I probably wouldn't, look to for valid statistical polling. But I just feel that it would be improper to limit council's ability to get feedback from the public, and yeah, because when you're polling the public or surveying the public, I'm like, that could be anywhere from, you know, a Facebook poll to, you know, asking just kind of a group of people that you happen to be in the room with what their thoughts are about something. So it's such a broad range of what could be considered a poll or a survey, that I wouldn't be able to, I think it would just be too tricky to basically manage. And then as well, I think that the public should be able to give their feedback freely to us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Worship. So it's no, everyone knows here that I am the subject of this discussion. My poll that I did with Peter Jenner and the other social media site that I chose to use on a Strathmore online group generated over 1,200 comments in this town. The feedback was enormous. It was the most talked about topic ever in Strathmore. And the reason I initiated feedback from our constituents is because I saw us going into a process where we were going to be looking at putting a first reading in or putting in some type of bylaw without consulting the public. This policy, or a development of this type of policy, would forbid me to do such a thing. It would, in its essence, I would have to go to council to get permission to talk to my constituents freely and openly in social media. And I had a number of different people thank me for coming out and actually engaging them. And that is not something that this is something that I take to heart. This is my job as a councillor. I was elected to do this. And if certain policies and bylaws, when they come to place, do not initiate because of our bylaws, if they do not initiate feedback from the public, and I was told by our CAO that this type of bylaw, we do not have a public hearing, we do not initiate consultation. It was only after I initiated that poll that our town administration administered their own poll. And so, you know, I think that this was such a positive learning experience for all of us that, you know, communication is key. And by having that opportunity, even though I did, and I honestly admit this, that I did make a mistake when one of the gentlemen that was making the poll drafted it. He did say, on behalf of council, Lorraine Bauer is asking. And that is not how I intended that to go out. So that was a mistake, and I take full responsibility, and I have apologized to this council for that, even though my apology was not accepted. And I'm sad that, you know, this is coming up, because I think we have a duty to find out what our community thinks about things, and I would not want this this motion to go through, because I think it would take away that right. Thank you.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Sobel, I appreciate that you're bringing this forward. I'm wondering if possibly we could do a friendly amendment instead of saying "and town council," allowing individuals, as long as it states in the bylaw that councillors cannot speak on behalf of all of council. Therefore, Councillor Montgomery's issues will have been managed, as well as Councillor Bauer's. Therefore, it's saying that we have a process for administration, and in that bylaw, we state that should a council member create a poll that it must be done by themselves. Does that make sense?
I don't know that I have to change anything, because all this is Councillor
Yeah.
Cox is a motion to
Yeah.
govern the process.
Yeah, okay.
How that's going to come back, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, and I'm fine with that then. And Your Worship, acting CAO has.
Okay, I think Jennifer also has something. Question, could I just ask a question for clarification? So you're directing them to bring to prepare a policy, and then we would look at the policy and decide if we're going to pass it or not? Okay. Mr. Legore, and then Jen, and then Councillor Corbeil.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's what I was going to suggest. You're just asking us to draft a policy. Let's not predetermine what that policy will say. We may be able to address Councillor Cox's comments. We may be able to address Councillor Bauer's comments in the policy. The thing is that when you're doing surveys, make sure you're asking the proper question. And our communications people are there to work with council if you have a question that you want to put out. So let's wait and see what the policy says, and then you can make the amendments that you want. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Legore. Jennifer, did you want to add anything?
Your Worship, I actually didn't have anything to add.
Oh, I saw you nodding a lot, and I thought you were anxiously wanting to say something. Could have been that Bailey's you had in your coffee, too. Councillor oh, did I say that in public? Crap. I just said crap. At least I didn't say a worse one.
Thank you,
Councillor
Worship.
Corbeil.
You know, I think that, I know Councillor Cox has really supported like a communication policy on what council can even put on their own Facebook pages and everything else. And I don't think it is a bad idea. I don't want it to limit us reaching out, but maybe there really should be some guidelines and some boundaries. And for that reason, I can support it coming back, and then we'll see what I guess comes back. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Corbeil. So we have a motion on the floor regarding a policy that would be then brought to us. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors, for your good points, and you helped me understand better. Item 12, bylaws. I don't believe we have any bylaws. Number 13, urgent business. We have one. 13.1, budget meeting dates. Jennifer, is this you?
I can speak to it, Your Worship.
Perfect.
So, Your Worship, administration originally asked council to set budget meeting dates for next week on Wednesday and Thursday, which is the 28th and 29th. However, administration is requesting that council give us a little more time. We need a little more time to prepare. And now we're asking council to postpone those meetings to November 4th and 5th, which is next Wednesday and next Thursday at 5 p.m.
Thank you for that. And the only thing I would hopefully remind you folks on is if you could try to keep that November 4th public meeting agenda a little lighter, because we'll be going pretty long that night. Yes. And I know you've already expressed your interest in being able to do that for us. Councillor Bauer and then Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. In anticipation for the budget meetings, which were earlier in October, decided that they would be at the end of October. I looked with my husband at when his holidays were, and they fell in the first week of November. So we have decided to be away that week, and so I am just going to ask this council whether or not they would be okay to perhaps move the budget meetings to the following week, either earlier or later, if that's at all possible. I would like to be a part of it. And I think it's important that we're all there. If that doesn't happen, I'm happy to remotely call in or do whatever I can to be a part of it if I'm so able.
The only thing is we would probably have to avoid Remembrance Day. So how does that work as far as time-wise for us, Mr. Legore?
Mr. Mayor, I'm confident that we should be able to do the budget in one evening. And I'm wondering if we could impose upon Councillor Bauer to zoom in for that meeting. And
absolutely,
even get it done.
Would that be okay, Councillor Bauer? She has agreed to that, Mr. Legore, so that would be, would you go with the 4th then as the one day, the one evening? Jennifer's nodding, so the Wednesday, November 4th would be the budget evening. And we would be able to have Councillor Bauer zoom in for that. Councillor Cox.
So I'm just gonna go on this, just because if we are gonna try and cram it in on one day, on Wednesday, November 5th, or 4th, sorry, would we be doing food?
Jennifer is nodding, so yes, food will be here. And again, you have to keep in mind the COVID restrictions as far as individually wrapped personal pan pizzas and things.
And I mean, if not, I can bring my own, I don't get a chance to go home at 5, so.
That makes total
We
sense.
actually already had dinner ordered for next week. We'll just move it to the week after.
Perfect. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. Last question on this. So they think they can do it in one, but are we booking two just to make sure?
Yes, you're
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
I'm sorry, I accidentally invited everybody.
oh crap,
No, it wasn't me.
I said it again.
It wasn't me.
So we would need a motion on this, correct? Councillor
Yes,
Corbeil.
a motion to postpone those two meeting dates.
I move the council postpone the budgets we had scheduled for October 28th and 29th, be moved to November 4th and 5th if needed at 5 o'clock.
Thank you for the motion. Now that we have a motion on the floor, is there any further discussion?
Just one of your invitations says it's at 9 o'clock, I apologize.
Gee, get it right if you're gonna send it.
Could we get a simpler phone for Councillor Peterson?
I took the invitees out.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? The motion is carried. And that brings us to 14 questions between councillors and/or council statements. I don't think I see anything. So then,
I do have one question. Because of the Facebook live meeting that Cave Starling attended regarding the handy bus, I've just had a load of inquiries, and I have asked them to just contact the handy bus again. I think it'd be really useful if there was a report to council sooner rather than later. And I wasn't at that meeting, so I don't know other than what Councillor Sobel was involved and other than that, but just at some point in time that we have it on an agenda so that the public can be made aware of what's going on, because there's lots of probably misinformation. But anyway, thank you, Your Worship.
okay, thank you very much. Brings it, is that you, Councillor Sol?
Sure. Yeah, just in response to that, so I took part in a meeting where a board member from the handy bus, mentioned that basically the handy bus had, for all intents and purposes, had split with the town, and was kind of surprising. So I wonder if I could impose on our committee member for the handy bus, Councilor Montgomery, to provide any information that he could in this regard.
I guess I would defer to Mr. Legore on what he would deem acceptable to broach at this time.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've had no indication from the Handy Bus Board as to what their intentions are on the future operations of the Handy Bus. And based on the groups that are going in there, we need to take a good look at whether there is going to be room for everybody. I know Handy Bus has indicated that they may have an interest in moving into that building. We're getting an awful lot of people that want to move in that building. And I believe that one of the people will be coming forward to council very shortly to make a presentation on the building as well.
And just for clarification, Mr. Legore, are you referring to the standard shoe stop building?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Montgomery.
Yeah, I guess if I could, I would invite any members of council who have specific questions to send them to me so that I can prepare specific answers and possibly, run them by Mr. Legore to make sure that they're satisfactory to him.
Oh, Jennifer, thanks.
Oh, sorry, Your Worship, I had a different, I had a different item to talk about, just real quick.
Okay, so,
So, Your Worship, the questions that I got were related to things that I knew nothing about. So I wasn't at the meeting, I wasn't a part of the meeting, so some of the questions came from persons involved in the standard building initiative, and some of them came from Wheatland Housing, and some of them came from people in community. So I referred them all to the handy bus, to you. I said, you know, your information is on the town website, and I didn't take any questions, but there is a lot of concern, a lot of questions, and a lot of confusion, and most of it is with me. I don't know what's going on, and had no idea. But thank you, Your Worship.
Did you want to address that, Councillor Montgomery? Sure. Councillor Cox, can you hang on just a bit?
Yeah, so again, like I'm certainly happy to answer any questions at all the council might have. You know, you can call me or email me. As council is probably aware, there are certain, you know, topics that can't be broached publicly at this time or should not be broached publicly at this time. But of course, you know, like if you have any questions, I welcome them. And if any members of the public have any questions or concerns related to the handy bus, they can certainly contact me. My email is jason.montgomery@strathmore.ca, and my phone number is on the website as well. And yeah, so I'm more than happy to answer any questions or concerns that anybody might have.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
Mine's just a little bit of naivety, maybe, confusion. This meeting, I didn't really know anything about it, so I just am looking as to, are we deciding who goes into this building? As a council, or is it? No, it's the group themselves. Okay, that's all I wanted. Thank you.
Your Worship, could maybe Councillor Montgomery comment on that meeting? Was Councillor Montgomery in the meeting with Mr. Starling because he was there as a member of the handy bus, right?
As a board member of the handy bus, so,
Yeah.
and that's I guess the point I was going to make is it's in the public.
Because that came
right
into the
now.
public, so if you knew what he was saying at that meeting, which I'm not aware completely, maybe you could shed some light, because I think he made some pretty significant statements about the handy bus.
And I shared all that with council.
Yeah.
And I guess.
I just don't understand
there's
it.
a lot of concern.
I do not understand it.
And I don't either. And as a board member, I'm hoping that some of this information was discussed at a board board meeting, which I'm not sure if they're in camera or not.
Well, it
Councillor
probably wasn't
Montgomery,
in
did you want
camera.
to address that?
Like I guess, yeah, like I don't know, and again, like, so as if any members of council are missing information or do not understand the operations of the handy bus, I'm more than willing to answer those questions. I have made council fully aware of you know, all angles of the handy bus situation. You know, and as for Mr. Starling's involvement in the meeting, that actually was not done. He was not asked to represent the Handy Bus Association at the meeting, so I can't comment on what he said at the meeting or anything like that. So. But again, I'm more than happy, you know, to answer any questions that anybody in the public or council might have. But again, I expect council to appreciate the fact that there are certain subjects that can't be talked about publicly.
Okay. Okay. That brings us to item 15, administrative inquiries. 15.1, administrative inquiry response regarding park in Hillview. We've got it on, in our agenda package. Is that okay for everyone? Jennifer, do we need to discuss this or just mention it in public so the public knows, or is it good enough in the agenda?
Your Worship, it's in the public agenda, so it's good in there. It's just there for council's information, and if there's
Okay.
any questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I believe that brings us to the end of this meeting. We just need a motion for adjournment. Councillor Corbeil.
I move to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn from Councillor Corbeil. All in favor? And we are adjourned. Deborah, you have the time, correct? 9:05.